As mentioned, I'm Georgie Zelenak. I am a bathymetry data manager at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I work in support of NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information. If we could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. In today's presentation, I'm going to give you all an overview of the archive at the IHO's Data Center for Digital Bathymetry. I'll talk about data access and discovery tools, tools for submitting data to the archive, and our plans moving forward in support of regional, national, and global mapping campaigns, including Seabed 2030, Lakebed 2030, and the IHO's Crowdsourced Bathymetry Initiative. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera here because of some bandwidth issues. But if you could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So first off, what is the relationship between NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information and the IHO Data Center for Digital Bathymetry? The DCDB is the recognized IHO repository for all ocean bathymetric data. NOAA's NCEI, formerly NGDC, has hosted the DCDB since 1990. Data are sent to the IHO DCDB, where we provide long-term archive, data management, and open access. The NCEI Bathy Viewer and the Dcdb Viewer share a database and, for the most part, contain the same information. The viewers are just tailored to slightly different audiences. So for the rest of this talk, I'll be wearing my international DCDB hat. We could go to the next slide. All right, so first off, how can you discover what data are available via the DCDB? Next slide. Let's take a look at the DCDB Data Viewer and how it supports the discovery and access of data. The viewer can be reached by selecting Access Data on the DCDB homepage, as shown here. Next. Next slide, please. Thank you. On this page, you can access over 60 terabytes of uncompressed multibeam data that are archived at the DCDB and made publicly available. You can see the ship track lines displayed in our map viewer here in green. Note that data contributed to the DCDB are typically not assessed and reside in the archive as is. It remains up to the users to determine their value and utility for their own purpose. In this way, the DCDB data holdings serve as a world reference for raw bathymetric data, which can be used as the basis for refined and processed products. Next slide. Unfortunately, as you can see here, at this time, we do not have any multibeam surveys within the Great Lakes. Next slide. However, on the same viewer, you can also access NOAA National Ocean Service, or NOS, hydrographic surveys in U.S. coastal waters, including older coverage in the Great Lakes. A lot of these surveys are quite old, dating back several decades. Many are pre-1950. Our colleagues have indicated that the region will be a focus area for Coast Survey in 2022, hopefully meaning new data will be available for here shortly. Next slide. The archive also includes approximately 5,500 single beam surveys, shown here in red. Next slide. Also on this page, you can access crowdsourced bathymetry data, or CSB. CSB is the collection of depth measurements from vessels using standard navigation instruments while engaged in routine maritime operations, i.e. not systematic surveying. We currently make over 25 gigabytes of CSB data from nearly 200 contributing vessels available to the public. Next slide. The DCDB archives data from NOAA and other federal agencies. Additionally, we regularly receive submissions from UNOL's Rolling Deck Repository, which provides data from the U.S. university fleet. We also archive data from a growing number of commercial companies, such as Fugro Geoservices, and data from international partners like GeoMar and the Geological Survey of Ireland, just to name a few. Next slide. Many of these flavors of data archived at the DCDB are routinely used for the production of improved and more comprehensive bathymetric maps and grids in support of both regional and global mapping projects, such as the Nippon Foundation GEBCO Seabed 2030 project. Next slide. In addition to displaying data that is archived at the DCDB, The viewer also includes select services from other organizations. Here you can see the Canadian Hydrographic Services Noaa 100, for example. Next slide. All right, so now that we have a sense of what all is available via the Dcdb Viewer, how do you actually access raw and processed data from the archive? Next slide. First, you can navigate to the link below, which will take you to the Dcdb Viewer. Alternatively, you can access this via the Dcdb homepage, as already shown. Next slide. From here, you can zoom to your region of interest and choose the data type you're interested in. As we just discussed, you have quite a few selections here. For this example, I'm going to say that we are interested in multi-beam data. You can see the check on multi-beam surveys in the top left. Right now, we don't have any coverage in the Great Lakes, so I'm going to say that we are interested in multi-beam surveys in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed we can work together to have Great Lakes data to demo next year. So let's go to the next slide. Now we can use the Identify tool in the top right to select an area of interest. You can use a single click, draw a rectangle, draw a polygon, or define a bounding box with coordinates. So for this case, I'm just going to do the simple draw a rectangle. Next slide. Now that you've selected your area of interest, you have a few options for how to download data. Let's say, simplest case, that you want all the files within your bounding box for all surveys that are listed. In this case, you can simply select Extract NCEI Dcdb Data. Next slide. This will take you to a summary page where you can see the number of files and volume of your request. You can enter your email in here and select Submit Request to kick off the process. Next slide. If you want a bit more information about the surveys before requesting files, you can select the Multi-Beam Surveys tab. Once you're ready to submit a request, just select Request Summary to go back to the previous screen. Next slide. Once you submit your order, you should receive an email, such as the one shown here. Feel free to click on the link to keep track of the status of your order. Be patient, the time it takes to receive your data will depend on the size of your request. Next slide. Once your order is complete, you will receive a second email that includes a link to download your requested files. Note that this link will only work for 3 days. After that, you'll need to put in a new request. Next slide. All right, so let's take a step back, and let's say that you look at the surveys in your bounding box and only one of them is actually of interest. Maybe say you want this Neil Armstrong survey from 2020. In this case, you can click on the individual survey. Next slide. This will bring you to the attributes of that survey that are populated by the provided metadata. You can click on Link to Data, and it'll bring you to the landing page for that survey. Next slide. The landing page shows various information about the survey and includes an option to download or request all files for that survey. This would take you back to the order request summary page that we already looked at. Next slide. If you scroll down on the page, you'll also see a list of all the files associated with this survey, including metadata and ancillary files. These files can be individually downloaded by clicking on them. Next slide. All right, so now we've covered how to access data within your area of interest. Keep in mind that there are other ways to filter data on the viewer as well. If you select Search NCEI Dcdb Surveys, you will see an additional filter options. You can search by the collection year, the date added to the database, the ship name, survey ID, and other options. You can make any of these selections and then also apply a bounding box as we did previously. So there are lots of options here to hopefully make it easy for you to find the data you are interested in. Next slide. Thank you. There are additional filters available for CSV data, including an option to filter by provider, also referred to as a trusted node or data aggregator. Hopefully in the next few weeks, you will see gloss added to this list when you can scroll down by provider. Next slide. We also have a new tool, the Archive Search page, to help you find surveys of interest. This page contains a single online listing of all of our multi-beam, NOS hydro, and water column sonar data archive holdings. It allows data users to quickly identify new data sets that have been added to the archives and gives data providers a convenient way to verify when their submitted data has made it into the archives. Next slide. Data can be filtered by ship, funding institution, archive date, and other details. Listings can be exported as CSVs, which can be programmatically scanned to compare customers' data holdings with data in the archive. Next slide. All right, so hopefully you get the sense that there are many ways to find data at the DCDB. For those of you that are frequent visitors to our map viewers though, you've no doubt hit a few snags here and there. For example, maybe you never received that pickup email that I showed earlier. When and if you do experience any issues, please know that we're here to help. Our data delivery systems are not without limitations, and system failures do occur. We're working on improving our systems, but again, if you experience any issues with data deliveries, please reach out to us and we will get you the data you need. You can always use the email address shown at the bottom of the screen here, mb.info@noaa.gov. Next slide. Also, there are some limitations on our map viewer that'll just be there for the time being. This is especially the case if you're requesting very large volumes of data. But we're always here to help with manual deliveries if needed. Data access through manual delivery facilitates cost-effective access using established systems. We leverage FTP delivery for smaller data volumes, say less than 300 gigabytes, and we can ship customer-provided external hard drives for larger data volumes, more than 300 gigabytes. Next slide, please. All right, so really emphasizing here, we want to help you access data that is already in the archive, but also we want to help make sure that you can get your data archived at the DCDB. Let's work together to ensure that the map viewer includes more data in the Great Lakes. Next slide. All right, so we work with potential providers to ensure that their data is in the best format for public use, that metadata is descriptive and informative, and to determine the best way to get those data to the data center. Understanding that organizing data can be cumbersome, the DCDB website also provides information and resources to assist in the packaging and submission of data. Our website provides information on acceptable data formats and resources to assist in the packaging and submission of data. At the top of the page here, you can see a link to submitting marine geophysical data at the IHO DCDB. Next slide. This document describes our recommended procedures for preparing bathymetry and other marine geophysical data sets for submission. You can also see here Cruise Pack, which is a standalone data packager designed to simplify the process for data providers through the use of a simple user interface with pull-down menus. The software generates necessary metadata files and creates straightforward and consistent data packages. The third resource we provide is, of course, us, your data managers. We're here to help you, to answer your questions, to assist in documenting your data, to do whatever we can to get these valuable data archived and available to the public. Next slide. The IHO DCDB webpage also contains information on contributing CSV data to the archive through a network of trusted nodes. These are organizations, companies, or universities that serve as data liaisons between mariners and the DCDB. This came up a bit earlier, but I really want to emphasize that if you're interested in becoming a trusted node, or if you're interested in seeing whether your CSV data could be submitted via an existing trusted node, we highly encourage you to reach out to us. You can use this email at the bottom. It's a bit hard to read, but it's bathydata@iho.int. That's been shared in the chat as well, or you can reach out to me directly. My email address will be at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. If you're interested in becoming a trusted node, we highly recommend that you review the IHO's B12 document, Guidance on Crowdsourced Bathymetry. This can be found via the DCDB webpage. Link is shown here. As is the theme in this presentation, if you have any questions about contributing data, please feel free to reach out to our team. We're here to support you. Next slide. I also want to highlight briefly the data provider engagement form created by the Integrated Ocean and Coastal Mapping team at Noaa. Meredith already mentioned this form yesterday, but I want to bring it up again since it really is a great tool. This form is an excellent way for potential new data providers to let us know they may have data available to contribute. Next slide. All right, so bringing all of this back to one key point. As the National and International Archive for Bathymetric Data, we at the DCDB are in a unique position to support all levels of mapping initiatives, from regional to national to global mapping campaigns. Next slide. Over the next decade, we anticipate a huge influx of data in response to the UN Decade of Ocean Science, Seabed 2030, Lakebed 2030, the IHO Crowdsourced Bathymetry Initiative, and NOMAC. To be able to accommodate existing infrastructure challenges, as well as these mapping efforts, next slide, we have created a plan to increase the size of our team, improve ways to contribute data, transition to a new flexible database schema, reinvent our end-to-end Bathy data stewardship pipeline, and continue to improve our map services. We are also committed to working with our partners to gather and implement archive, discovery, and access needs for Seabed 2030 and NOMAC. Next slide. Over the last several years, we've worked hard to grow our team in response to the data windfall coming our way. We hired 2 full-time data managers, as well as a full-time junior data manager. We are also currently on the search for a junior DevOps engineer. Because of our stable and larger team, we're now diving into the more complex issues to address community feedback and needs. Next slide. In addition to growing our team, working with data providers, and maintaining tools for the public, we're also transitioning to a new database schema and pipeline. Our current database schema is rigid, outdated, and inflexible. Over the past year, we've been hard at work building a new system that addresses these issues. The keyword during development has been flexibility. Bathymetric surveys today look much different than they did a decade or 2 ago, with multiple instruments, scientists, and even platforms associated with a single data set. Things get even more complicated as you look at products incorporating data from multiple surveys. We have no doubt that such changes will continue, and the new schema is designed to allow us to easily add new parameters as needed in the future so that we can adapt to the changing world. The schema will also eventually be shared by multiple data types within NCEI, opening the door for more comprehensive map viewers in the future. Next slide. To address the shortcomings of our outdated pipeline, our development team is working with us to build a new end-to-end multi-beam archiving system. The new pipeline will feature increased automation, which will provide more efficient archiving times. Our team is also improving our error handling and notifications. The new pipeline is designed in conjunction with the new database schema, and it includes flexible options for future file readers and plugins, ensuring the pipeline will fit our needs well into the future. All of this will enable us to handle new multi-beam data formats when they arise. We'll be able to handle new platform types, for example, unmanned systems, and we'll be better prepared to handle process data and products. Next slide. Simultaneously, our developers are also creating a new CSV pipeline that is currently undergoing final testing before deployment. It's been a few years since our original data pipeline was established, and like most infrastructure developments, we've learned more than a few things along the way. We're very excited to transition to a new pipeline with greatly improved reliability that will allow us to more rapidly onboard new trusted nodes. Next slide. All of these changes won't have an impact on our community unless they are represented on our map viewers. As these improvements progress, we're putting focus on our map services. Our amazing GIS team has been looking at possibilities from the new database schema and pipeline, including separate layers for raw and processed data, as well as a layer for products such as grids, allowing users to select a level of data of their interest. We will also eventually be able to show polygons that represent the swath coverage derived after ingest. We will also be able to select individual files within a survey, This is a feature you can already find on the water column sonar data viewer from NCEI. Next slide. I previously mentioned that the Dcdb Viewer shows select services as well as data archived directly at the center. Our GIS team is working hard to add additional services and display the spatial extent of other known data. Thanks to the hard work of the team, we now show services including eBondnet, as well as services from Australia, Canada, France, Japan, and the Netherlands. Additionally, the GIS team was able to use geometries provided by our partners to represent known non-public data on the map viewer. While these data cannot be downloaded, this tool is useful for those planning upcoming surveys. Next slide. Here is another example of our map viewer improvements. Our new multi-beam bathymetry mosaic image service allows the user to visualize multi-beam data holdings archived at the Dcdb as a grid and to see the full coverage of the data without first having to download and grid the data themselves. We are also working to enhance grid extract so that it incorporates the multi-beam bathymetry mosaic. Next slide. We also recognize that the future is in the cloud. Over the past year, our team has been hard at work establishing a bifurcation system to ensure that CSV data reaches an AWS bucket as well as our on-premise archive. We're also working through pilot projects to visualize and access CSV data from a cloud-hosted point store. Eventually, the goal is to extend this work to incorporate all flavors of bathymetry into a seamless point store in the cloud. Next slide. All right, so in the end, we're making progress and we know we still have a long ways to go. But we're hopeful, especially now that we have a solid team and the support from our GIS team, developers, and other data managers, that we will be able to meet the needs of the seafloor mapping community and satisfy the goal of map once and use many times. So we want you to know that we're here to help you. Please reach out to us, whether that's to discuss how we can support you in contributing data and/or map surfaces. We also want to help you find our data. And we want to hear from you on how we can better support Lakebed 2030. Final slide, please. All right, so with that, I will thank you. My email address is shown here on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns, and I'm happy to answer any questions that have come up during the presentation.
Great, thanks, Georgie. I appreciate the talk and the way you sort of demystified the process of how people can contribute and what it looks like. And sometimes that's the hardest thing for people to get past. So are these slides, or is this type of support, you mentioned call anytime, but are these slides going to be available for people?
Yes, absolutely. We will share these slides.
Okay, good. And so you say there's no Great Lakes information in there now, and so obviously that I think raises a bunch of questions from everybody. And you know, what's the gap, or what is the lag as to stuff that's been recently collected to coming in and being ingested into the database?
Okay, so I will say there's nothing on the map viewer now, but this is a point we're actively working on. Just within the past few months, I've been working with Gloss fairly regularly to get them on board as a CSV trusted node. So hopefully within the next few weeks, we'll start seeing some of that data roll in. My colleague, Christy Reiser, is also working with the team at Thunder Bay, including Stephanie, to set up a submission agreement, and that'll pave the way for that data to start reaching the map viewer. So nothing today, but this is something we are actively working on. And if you have data you're interested in sharing, or if you have a service that we can add to our map viewer, please reach out to us. We want to help fill this gap.
And that's, I think, just the strong message that for everyone here and everyone you talk to in the audience, and that is that it's ready, and let's get that information in there. So you had mentioned the crowdsource opportunity, and we had one question here, and it raises a common question we hear from many people, and that the recreational boater community, you know, how can they contribute to crowdsource data? But more importantly, people are always concerned, what is the standard that they need to follow in order to provide good data?
So we really try to keep the barriers to entry as low as possible. there are very few required fields. It's, lat, long, depth, time. That's really all that is required. Additional information about optional fields are in that B12 guidance document that I shared a link to. But this is something where if you're an individual mariner interested in contributing, feel free to reach out to us. The easiest option really is to connect you with an existing trusted node. A good example is Rose Point Navigation. That's software that many mariners already are using. And they have set it up so there's a one button option that you can select. And then when you update your charts, that your log information is automatically sent to the Dcdb. So easiest option is we hook you up with a trusted node that's already existing. If you're a larger organization, we're happy to talk with you and see if we can add you in as a trusted node. That's the process Gloss is working through right now. So whether you're a mariner, organization, reach out to us. We're happy to have that conversation with you to see where we can fit you into this project. So we really do want this data.
Great. We had another question that may have shown up in your chat, but is the Noaa OCS Bathy Lidar data in the Dcdb?
All right, so I was looking at this actually right before the presentation. This is we'll provide links to it in our NCEI viewer. I'll drop a link to that in right after this. That will allow you to see some of the coverage with LiDAR data, and then you can follow links to access it via Digital Coast.
Okay, great. And so, thinking of this, when you have enormous amounts being contributed on the seabed side of things or the initiative, and so how much did you see a ramp up in contributed information since these initiatives had launched in terms of, is it double? Is it more than double of what you were getting previously?
Yeah, so as mentioned, our team is rapidly growing right now. I myself have only been here for about 2 years, so I'm not particularly well positioned to talk about historically how it's been growing. I would say we are seeing more and more discussions, more and more talk of submission agreements. I would say the ball is really just starting to get rolling on this. But between the forum created by IOCM, folks reaching out to us directly, we know that more is coming any day now, and we're doing all we can to prepare for it. So volumes are starting to increase, but we know that's really going to be ramping up in the coming years.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you. Well, Georgie, I really appreciate it. Again, it's sometimes it's people understanding the process and how simple it is to break that barrier of giving it a shot. So hopefully we're going to see that, and certainly from Gloss's perspective, you'll see enormous contributions coming in. So thank you for your presentation today, and we'll take it looks like just about a 2-minute break. So again, if you want to stretch your legs, get a quick cup of coffee, and then we'll start up again in just about 2 minutes. So thanks, everybody.